I believe this through and through. Community is the most powerful healing tool of all. We got our traumas from other people. We learned our beliefs from other people. We learned our we learned how to remain dysregulated consciously or unconsciously from other people. We are going to heal with other people. We are going to shift all those behaviors and beliefs and skill sets with other people. We are meant to co-regulate. We are wired to belong. And anybody who pushes a narrative that you're meant to do things on your own is full of shit.
Welcome to the Stay Grounded podcast. I'm your host, Raj Jana, founder of Liberate, and it's my mission to help you become the most grounded, loving, and authentic version of yourself that you can be. Each week, I interview experts in the fields of mindset, spirituality, and emotional well-being. My brilliant guests share their tools, stories, and unique perspectives to help you develop the skills you need to show up fully for the people and things that matter most in your life. Now let's dive in.
Hey guys, and welcome to this week's very special episode of Stay Grounded, February's monthly reflection episode. This one's a doozy. We cover a lot of ground. February was a really rich and potent month. I feel like this year's just felt so big for me. I feel like every month I've just had such big breakthroughs. There's something about being in Nosara that just brings out a whole new level of growth for me. This is how it was last year too. I just felt like things were just happening so much quicker and faster. And the more I get out of my own way, the deeper I can go within myself. And this month really helped me get to some deep layers of habits and patterns and realizations about myself that honestly I've been looking for a long time. And I feel like I've been making baby steps towards just becoming a better version of myself every single month. And this month really, or these last few months, it really felt like I've made some massive shifts as a result of me just making deposits over the last few years. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode. This one was really interesting because I was pretty vulnerable or just around things that I'm working on right now when it comes to sexuality, when it comes to dating, when it comes to self-pleasure practices, and like really examining like my own relationship to all of it. And so it's the first time I've really kind of brought this stuff up on the show. And so just warning, we don't go into any graphic material or details, so you can listen to this. It's nothing like that. And I think there's a taboo around talking about sexuality but a lot of our patterns and a lot of our emotional states and so much of our unconscious needs and desires are rooted in sexuality and sensuality. And so I really wanted this episode to sort of normalize the conversation and bring it to the forefront, because I really feel like in order for us to heal as a collective, for us to really begin doing deep work together in community, we have to create safe spaces to talk about different aspects of life that normally don't get talked about. So I hope this episode is beautiful. I hope it sheds light on where my patterns came from, my habits came from, my desires to escape came from. And I hope it inspires a level of awareness for yourself and beautiful and healthy dialogues with the people in your life around your own conditioned patterns and unconscious behaviors and what you can do to break free from them if you choose to do that. So love you guys. Appreciate you all. Without further ado, here is February's monthly reflection episode. Enjoy. Yo, what's up, everyone? And welcome back to this episode of Stay Grounded. Georgina, welcome back to the show.
Hey Raj, good to be back. Excited to hear what's been happening this month.
It's starting to get fun. It's starting to get fun. Vipassana was a massive unlock for me. I'm just going to like really give it another shout out. Nowadays I'm very careful to say like everybody needs this, like because we're all so unique and we're just all unique and different tools for different people. And I really do believe in like that personalized, precision approach to psychological care.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something profound about the technology of being and the technology of Vipassana that's really allowed me to have some deeper conversations with myself this month. And
have the courage and the tool sets and the intrinsic tool set, the tool set of my awareness more than like an external tool to be able to work through some really deep layers of like things that I've been wanting to work on for a while, but I just haven't been able to because I didn't feel resourced or I didn't feel strong enough or I didn't have the constitution to be able to do so. I'm really grateful for Vipassana and I'm going to give it a massive shout out for anybody who's on the fence. That's a brilliant technology. It's free. So, and you can do premium ones too if you don't want to go do the free one, but I have to give it a massive shout out because it's truly, I just think it's one of those tools that can benefit everybody. Finally.
So, what do you think it was about the Vipassana experience that has taken you to this new place of being able to explore at a deeper level?
Well, it's given me a tool set to be able to sit with my uncomfortable emotions, but not just my emotions, my physiological cravings, and actually zoom out to a level that has been really empowering. Like now, when I'm in a trigger, and I've always been able to do this to some degree because I have tools and I have a company in this space. Like, so we help people do with Liberate, like all this stuff, right? Like, but
Mhm.
there's something that Vipassana just allowed me to unlock my own inner technology, my own inner tool set to be able to just like when I'm inside of a trigger or when I'm craving a food or when I'm reaching for self pleasure or any of this, it's like I now have like a deeper level of awareness around why I'm doing it, where it's coming from, and if it's serving me. And the if it's serving me part is what's so empowering because, I'm the type of, at least for me in my life, like once I realize that something isn't serving me is when I begin the journey of figuring out how I can release myself from the hold it has on me.
Mhm.
It's not always like oh, it's going to happen overnight, right? Like, or it's going to happen. Like, I know that, my sugar eating habit it's something that isn't serving me. And I've been on a journey to work on that for a while. And finally, I feel like I unlocked a lot that's allowed me to get to a place that can really anchor in like, okay, like I can go weeks now without eating sugar and be fine.
How? Tell me more.
Well, that's it. Like it's because I've now gotten to a place in my own awareness, and we'll talk. Okay, so maybe this is a great segue. Um, One of the biggest decisions I made this month after my eye gazing experience with my mom, and really getting to heal and release so much of emotional angst, I would say, that was held in my system that came from the root experiences with my mom. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back to the last month's reflection episode and listen to that. I'm not going to recap it here. But that experience, after that, I really got to a place of like clarity that my next journey was actually to not masturbate, to not ejaculate, to not pursue women, and to actually be fully in my energy. And as a young man with a lot of energy, who's doing a lot of things in the world, who is, it's like, it was really hard. It was extremely hard. And I made that decision because I knew that me reaching for any level of pleasure in that form was the same energetic thread as me reaching for any form of sugar, as me reaching for anything. It's like they're all connected in some ways because it's a physiological response. I like to think of like the phone, food, and uh, what do you want? Self pleasure, ejaculation, masturbation, whatever we want to call it. Like these activities are all in some ways pleasure based, dopamine evoking responses. And it's been really healing for me because the second I pulled away the coping tool and of self pleasure, of porn, of masturbation, like whenever I just stepped away from it, man, all my shit came up. And the technology of awareness that I learned in my Vipassana of being able to name the sensation in my body and label it as a part that's not meant to be discarded, That's not meant to be thrown away. That's not meant to be shamed. That's not meant to be judged, but just noticing the part. And then the inner skill set that I've developed now and cultivated and integrated from tools like Vipassana into my life of being able to rise above it and almost like connect to a higher column of mastery, power, of control, of witness consciousness. And to be able to like connect to that and then connect to the mission of that side of me, that part of me, it's like that was the complete unlock. Like that was actually what empowered me to break beyond. It's like, oh yeah, there's a part of me that wants all these distractions, that wants to go mope, that wants to go release, that wants to. And can I rise to another level of awareness who's the ascended master who doesn't need any of that shit? Who's actually able to regulate his nervous system because it's his nervous system instead of letting it get hijacked by life. And we've all allowed our nervous systems to get hijacked, intentionally or unintentionally, because of the fact of being born. We were all born from infinite consciousness into a human form in environments where we are forced to be supported by caretakers that may or may not have had the skills to support us and give us the regulation we needed, the safety we needed in order for us to develop healthy, resilient nervous systems. And then life got its hands on us. And so we're all walking around dysregulated. And then the world is designed by dysregulated human beings. Everything that's being sold right now is being sold by dysregulated human beings. All of our politicians have dysregulated nervous systems. All of our leaders right now are dysregulated. And so when you think about the dysregulation that exists, it makes sense that dysregulated people are developing solutions to solve dysregulated problems. And so for me, in this journey, by going from dysregulated to now, I feel like I'm much more regulated. And some of these technologies allow you to develop a level of awareness and mastery of regulation. And that's really what I feel like I was able to access. So it's like, I know it sounds kind of simple, but like it really is just making the decision to access a part of me that's a fucking boss. And being there and sitting in it and rooting down versus coping. And this is what our Stay Grounded short was for those of you who missed it a few weeks ago. This is what I was kind of navigating. What would it look like instead of me reaching for the coping that I chose to root down into this part of me and really like meditate and remember this energy that's just so vast and powerful and raw, and really from there make decisions. And it's been a complete game changer. Like I feel like I'm really channeling my gifts in a way that are unreal. Like I'm manifesting partners for Liberate that are just like ungodly collaborators. Like the way that I'm creating right now and the manifestation that's happening and the abundance that's showing up for my projects are like unreal. And I can't say it's because I stopped touching myself because that's not sustainable. I don't want to do that. And there's something to be said about stepping away from our coping to sit with the vast discomfort of ourselves and then learning skills to rise above it and learning how to access the deeper column of energy that we are so that we can actually be more in alignment with that and let that guide our lives. And I think from there, I just feel infinite potential. I feel pretty expansive right now, to be honest, if I'm being real. Um, and like literally like 2 days ago, I was like, not that I wasn't eating sugar like throughout the month of February, like I was. Then like a week ago, I was just like, I think I'm done, and I haven't had anything in a week, and I'm fine. It was literally like I flipped the decision, and now that's like part of my it's a part of my operating system is just to like decide that I'm done, and then I'm done.
Hmm. Okay, but I mean, that's that's um that's super interesting and super like powerful what you've been describing.
Thought I'd start talking about self-pleasuring on the Stay Grounded
I
podcast.
know, like,
Here we
well,
are. Here we
conversation you
are.
took
It took me 5 years to start talking about my penis on the show, guys. At least I didn't start on week one. Um,
I'm curious to know that, because I can imagine most of us could be like, okay, I'm not going to do that, whether it's drinking or alcohol or self pleasure, any of these things that are so easy to reach to. And I can imagine that you can push through that desire of like this willpower and say, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. But I don't think you're saying that. You're not saying that you've kind of resisted. You're saying that you've surrendered into a different space. So can you explain that moment of how you're able to transcend like the easy option of just like the denial or the rejection and the resistance, and get into a place where you're able to transcend those common urges?
so
And it's what you've been describing.
So let's talk about a coping mechanism of mine was dating, women, intimacy, right? So like I would go on dates, I would like connect with others, like it's like that was a part of my coping. When I examined it after my mom and I did our big release, I realized that a lot of that desire and the energetics that were causing me to go and just be on dates and do all that was actually coming from an energy of self-abandonment. So when I got to the root of that part and I got to hold that part and I got to integrate that part and I got to love that part and I got to realize the beauty of that little boy and how hurt he was and do that necessary work first, then the decision to just not go on dates and just be in my own energy and not need to pursue anybody felt a lot easier.
Ooh.
So this is the piece, and this is the piece. It's like, so there's that piece of us that is attached to the coping. It's like the food. The food is the biggest mirror we have. Gina talks, she used to talk about this all the time, every time I'd bring her on the show. And like there's, this is not now uncommon knowledge. Like it's like your relationship to your food is everything. Like, why are you reaching for the food? There's a part of you that is reaching, and the part has needs that hasn't been listened to, or we haven't learned how to listen to those parts of us. We haven't learned how to build intimacy with those parts of us. We haven't developed the skill sets to hold those parts of us. Therefore, we cope. And so the skill set development to hold our parts and to take responsibility for that, because it's you have to take responsibility for the role your parts are playing in your behaviors. It's not acceptable to hurt people and be a projecting or be a narcissist or do all those things just because you have hurt parts. I refuse to give that to people. But also empathy, right? Like all of these behaviors that we may judge or condemn or try to shun come from parts within us. And those parts are asking to be heard. They're asking to be held. They're asking to be listened to. And it takes courage. It takes courage. It takes commitment. It takes vulnerability. It takes patience. It takes community. It takes other people really teaching and holding space for you to be able to go into those parts. And so that's where I would really, it's like the bridge is working with the part. And then when you work with the part, all of the coping is easier. It's like you'll have echoes of coping. I'll be like, oh, I go like it's like you work through the part, and then all of a sudden you're like, I have spaciousness to then make a hard. And so this is where it's like it's taken me, 5 years to really challenge my relationship with self pleasure, porn. I mean, like just talking to porn for a second, just on behalf of men, like, you know, I started watching porn when I was like, what, 9 or 10?
Oh my God,
Like when
seriously?
when I could touch my like I was like 11, like
Wow.
or I don't know, somewhere young, like I remembered like started touching myself. It felt really good, and I was like watching something on TV, and it like felt amazing, and then I was like, oh my God, and then I started looking for more of it online, and I became somewhat addicted for years. And I think a lot of and like there's just like, and I realized in my healing journey, just like it wasn't that I was even addicted to the women that I was viewing in porn. Like it was more like I was so dysregulated as a child, I had so much anxiety and so much like dysregulation that like I'd started associating ejaculating and coming as like it's like a way to like calm myself. I don't know if you've seen the movie The Wolf of Wall Street. It's a popular movie about, the Wall Street kind of culture. And, Matthew McConaughey plays a scene in the movie that I think actually really well represents like a majority of men in society is like this idea that like if I'm working really hard, I gotta masturbate like multiple times a day to just release. I gotta have it's like so like sexual energy is related to releasing it instead of cultivating it. And so like there's this culture that's just created. And so like when I started doing the work, like Gina was so healing for me. Like we healed so much of this together in our relationship. I'm so infinitely grateful for her in so many ways because it really allowed me to like go into these parts and actually like look at the underlying like insecurities and the reasons, like the parts of me that were reaching for porn, and then like the parts of me that were reaching for ejaculation, and the parts of me like that couldn't just hold the energy. Like without her, I don't think I could have gotten to that level of intimacy with myself. And this is why I'm so passionate about talking. I use myself as an example because I know these are tough conversations to have, and it's tough to um and for me it's been a long journey of learning to separate porn from self-pleasure, and then like self-pleasure from like regulation. It's like there's so much linking there, and it's been a really long journey. And I feel like this month I finally made the big leap, the big decision to cut everything out and be with all of it because I felt like I had developed the skill sets and the internal mastery to finally go after a physiological habit that I had developed at an age where my nervous system was still being developed. At a
Yeah.
young age of 9, when I'm so impressionable, I learned this skill or this thing, and it's taken me. And this is why I'm like, even through Liberate and our nonprofit Humans Are Good, like we're starting to do a lot of work with kids because if you can teach kids the skills and the resources to like not allow this stuff to build and give them healthy resources for nervous system regulation at that age, you give them another option to move the energy that's inevitable with life, like the life force energy that's coming through us that we are told to numb is all actually just a part of our life force. And the system doesn't want that unleashed because it's very hard to control all of this power. So
Wow. I tell you what, it's very like hitting for myself to hear you talk about your experiences is, I'm older than you, and when I was that age, there was no internet. Porn was on VHS tapes, or it was top shelf magazines, or potentially pay as you view um, TV channels. It wasn't really accessible in the way that you've been describing to children, and that's just mind blowing for myself to think about how, as you're describing, like children having so much accessibility to things that never used to be available to children, really, and how, although self pleasure is a very natural experience, to tie that into a visual image of adults doing adult things as a child, oh my gosh, that's that's a lot, isn't it?
it's a
That's
lot. And you know, this is why
very different to just having thoughts in your head or feelings. Just these feelings is different to
it's
actually
different. And now with, I mean, just look at
thoughts.
what like the technology, there's so much more access we have. And this is
Yeah.
why I have a lot of compassion for this conversation. I know it can be super triggering. Like it was not easy for Gina and I in our relationship to start having these conversations, and it was like really tough, but so I'm so proud of us because we really held space for all of our parts, her triggers around it, my triggers around it, and our parts that were all hurt. And this comes back to again building relationship with self, right? It's having the spaciousness to be accepting of all of our parts. And that's what deconditioning is. Like we've been conditioned to judge and to say something is right and something is wrong, but I'm inviting us to really expand our awareness to hold all of our parts, the parts that we're judging and the part that is judging, right? There's both sides. And to come into harmony with what we need. What was the core need that we didn't get or didn't learn how to give ourselves at those ages? And how can we learn to give ourselves those needs now? How can we learn to access those parts now? I mean, this is ultimately everything we teach at Liberate is how do you do this inner work, right?
Hmm.
Because this is what is missing in my eyes. This is the education that's missing in society. The education that's missing in society is not anything other than how do we do this deeper exploration? How do we be better humans? How do we be more effective humans by learning how to hold space for all the aspects of self that are expressing and then turning into the variety of coping mechanisms that are either creating damage on our bodies, hurting other people, or creating disharmony in our relationships? Like,
Can you talk some more around this notion of that the healing process you've been through? So, if we return, say, to porn as an example, um, and then think about how potentially like damaging that can be in the sense of how women maybe are portrayed in porn and the objectification and that kind of stuff. And how do you go from the place of using porn and then recognizing that it may be problematic for you to use it, and then recognizing how it might have impacted you in a negative way and other people in a negative way? And I guess I'm asking, how do you work through things like guilt or self-rejection or all those kind of negative feelings that can come up when you recognize a habit that actually has been quite could have been detrimental? Does my question make
well,
sense?
this comes back to self-love. It comes back to self-acceptance and
Hmm.
forgiving yourself, right? I like to think of Kubler-Ross has the 5 stages of grieving. And I like to think of life through that lens. I don't think it's just for grief. I think grief is ultimately at the underbelly of almost all of our emotional states. The
Hmm.
anger, fear, everything we have is like, I like to think of as unprocessed grief. So if we look at Kubler-Ross, I think the 5 stages of grieving are like shock, then it's denial, then it's bargaining, then it's depression, then it's acceptance. So if you look at parts through the lens of Kubler-Ross, parts therapy, I like to, like the way my brain works is, I study psychology, I study all these different modalities, and then I like piece them together so that they can be useful, right? So Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grieving with parts therapy. Like, so if we combine these two, let's take a look. Like, okay, so I have this part of me that I just became aware of. So awareness right here. I'm in shock. Great. I'm in shock of this part.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
like appalled. I'm in denial of it even.
Hmm.
Then I start to rationalize the part
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
rationalize its existence and why it must be. And so these first 3 parts right here, the shock, the denial, and the rationalization, when you're in that exploration, conversations with your loved ones can be super fucking triggering
So maybe give
because
us some context. Could you put some like context behind those parts? Maybe put on some specific things that you experienced.
without going too into details around my personal life and everything that's happening or it's happened in my life, right? Like, let's say there's a conversation. Let's just use porn as a great example. And there's a
Mm.
couple that's having a conversation about porn. Let's just say that's the case, right? Let's
Yep.
just say that the there's the masculine has a relationship with porn that is triggering the feminine
Hmm.
for all the reasons why, right?
Hmm.
Feminine's like, I don't want this. I want it out. Great. And the masculine's like, this isn't a problem. Denial. I'm only doing it to release my head. It has nothing to do with the people I'm watching. It's like all in my, you don't get it. Great.
Hmm.
Then you might go to bargaining, which is, this is helping me be a better X. This is helping me with this. This is improving our sex life. This is the bargaining. And then you get to the depression because then you start to, and this is all based on levels of awareness, right? So willingness to do the work. This is why it's like, this is not for everybody, but this is from my experience, willingness to do the work. When you get to that level of depression, now you're like,
well, fuck, all those things I was saying were all bullshit. The reason I was reaching for porn is because I actually felt insecure, or because, or the reason I was watching this type of porn is because there was this uh, deeper underlying shame that I wasn't expressing, or whatever, right? Like I don't know what like you can. There's a million directions you can go there around like that whole exploration, and then that's where now you can hold with self love. Those are the parts that like if you can share those parts with your partner, magic can happen. That's where you can really heal in those departments. And that's when you can get to acceptance because shame dies in the sunlight.
Mm.
Shame dies when you give light to it, when you talk about it in community, when you bring it up. This is ultimately why the podcast has been so healing for me, to be completely honest. To be seen and heard by people that I've never met before in person, and to receive messages from all over the world that like your podcast is like, and to hear that is so healing for me because it's actually giving. So like selfishly, I am getting something out of this podcast, which is why I invest so much in it, because it's actually helping me heal the parts of me that are ashamed, that are trying to hide, that don't want to be seen. And that's then when you get to acceptance, which is the fifth and final stage of Kubler-Ross, right? And that's where now you can go into more of the light, you can go into gratitude, you can go into more those more positive states. But this is the path of the shadow work. It's going through each of these, and I like Kubler-Ross as a frame because it then allows you to assess where you're at or where your part is at, or what part is active. If you use internal family systems, that's another great modality for doing parts work. Like you can really start to look at like, okay, which part is working and why. And this is like self leadership. I believe that all of us can learn these skills. I wasn't born with this level of awareness. I devoted myself over the last 6 years to studying myself the same way I might study anything I'm passionate about. And that self study is ultimately what we're speaking to. If somebody's listening to this podcast, I'm assuming you're also interested in the act of self study. And that's how you begin to do that. Does that answer some of the questions you asked? Because
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's great. It's great to have some context as well to just explore how potentially someone might move through those 5 stages. And do you feel that you've moved through all the 5 stages? Do you feel like you're at the other side?
yeah, I mean, that's why I'm able to talk about it. If I was still in it, I'd be super triggered, or I'd be like, I mean, I've been working through this stuff for years now, right? Like I've been working through this stuff for years and I've never talked about it. The only reason I'm bringing it forward now is because I feel like I finally got to a state of completion. I got to a state of mastery of this level of the game, and now I get to begin the next one. And I don't know what the next one's going to have. It's going to have new challenges, new experiences, but this is the process of growth. It's like a spiral upwards, right? So like you just keep growing into more and more awareness, and you get to unleash different aspects of yourself. And this journey is never ending. It's not like I'm getting to an end zone.
Mm.
It's just you continue learning more about yourself, and your behaviors change when you learn. When you become more of who you are, you shift and you change. And that's ultimately also a reason why people don't want to do the work, because what if I change and people don't want to be around me? Or that was all big fears that I've had, like I've openly talked about that with my communities, and I've had a lot of healing experience. I could not do this without community. I believe this through and through. Community is the most powerful healing tool of all. We got our traumas from other people. We learned our beliefs from other people. We learned our we learned how to remain dysregulated consciously or unconsciously from other people. We are going to heal with other people. We are going to shift all those behaviors and beliefs and skill sets with other people. We are meant to co-regulate. We are wired to belong. And anybody who pushes a narrative that you're meant to do things on your own is full of shit.
Yeah. So if someone's listening right now and they can relate to your experience and they're thinking, yeah, I've been in this, I recognize where Raj was, what would you say to them?
I recognize where Raj was. Can you
in the sense
elaborate?
of reaching for these coping mechanisms rather than being fully with themselves.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would come back to rooting. Like anytime you feel like coping, just be aware that you're doing it. And then the invitation is to root, right? And I would also say like don't beat yourself up if you fall short or if you like slip. Like it's not about being perfect. It's just about paying attention and rooting more than you're coping. I've been doing that for 4 years. I've been rooting a little bit more each month than I've been coping. A brilliant friend of mine actually lives in Nosara. Um, he was telling me like he's been on a 5 year journey to quit drinking. And he made the decision 5 years ago, like in 5 years, I'll be done. And every year he's just drank a little less. And this is the final year. In fact, it's funny. Like, it's funny that we both had like, I might have to talk to him about this. Like, funny how we both have had like completion cycles, in Q1 of 2024. Where like I've been on like a multi-year process of, shifting my relationship to my sexuality. And
So
so he's been on a multi-year relationship of shifting his relationship to drinking. And so I think it can be, I think, there's that famous quote, we overestimate what we can do in a year and we underestimate what we can do in 10. That's exactly the example here. It's not about getting rid of something overnight. Even drinking for me, like I used to drink so much 5 years ago. And each year I just slowly started drinking less and less. It's not that I even forced myself to. I just drink. And now I don't really drink. It's not that I have restrictions on myself. I just don't crave alcohol anymore.
mhm,
And it's interesting how that happens,
mm,
where we just so anyways, I'll just name that. Like it's not about, like I think playing the long game with your coping strategies is better than trying to say, oh, New Year's resolution, I'm going to be done in a quarter. It's like, what? Like you learn these skills, these parts of you that have been powering these coping mechanisms have been alive since you're a kid.
sure.
And you're
Yeah.
telling me that you're going to go and set a New Year's resolution to shift your behaviors in 3 months?
Yeah.
Like
When you say it like that, it sounds crazy.
let's be
Hmm.
honest with ourselves and let's give ourselves the time, space, and patience required to actually make lasting changes. It does not happen overnight. But when we dedicate ourselves, when we surround ourselves in community, when we are giving the tools, when we have the resources, when we know what to do, and we're accountable to our word, both from ourselves and others, amazing things can happen in a few years. Blasting changes can happen in a few years. I feel like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so
So how has your relationship with your body and your sexuality, how has that changed since you've had these experiences?
um I feel much more connected to my energy. It's the best way to say it. Like I feel like I feel fucking huge. Like energetically just like very alive and connected. And I feel like I'm able to move through triggers faster and I'm able to manifest a lot faster too. And I can't say that this is the crazy thing about reflection and why this is the fallacy of reflection and having a mental process to try and understand something
Mm.
that isn't meant to be understood.
Hmm.
Like
hmm
when I zoomed out and I did my reflection process, I was like, oh, yes. So, Raj, you stopped pleasuring yourself on this day of this month. And look at all these amazing things that happened over the next several weeks. My mind wants to go and create a formula that's like, oh, not doing that led to these types of outcomes. 1 + 1 = 2.
hmm
Not how that shit works.
hmm
So I have the awareness now of the fallacy of reflection.
hmm
So I can't say that, my life is fucking awesome as a result of me having this relationship with my body. What I do know is that the intention behind me going down this path was that I wanted to clear my field of any parts of me that were reaching for sex, women, intimacy. And I wanted to hold those parts within me so that the next time I do engage in intimacy, in sexuality, in connection. It's coming from a place of wholeness and not from a place of lack, not from a place of like anxiety, not from a place of, oh my God, I need connection. No, I'm so solid within me that now it's like whatever I, my intuitive understanding of this whole thing vulnerably was that I can't solve a problem with the same consciousness that created it. So if I want to be in a, if I want to be in the relationship that I desire, I have to do something different. And not that Gina and I didn't share an amazing relationship. It's not that, like we had such beautiful love and there's a reason why we're not together right now. It's because I'm calling in something else. And so is she. We're both calling in something different. And so if I keep behaving the same way I always have, I'm just going to create more of what I've always gotten. And so that's why I chose to go down this path. And so I don't know what my relationship will be when I engage in intimacy again. I don't know.
Are you
Um,
worried that you'll kind of just slip back into old ways? Or do you
uh,
feel that
the grand
there's just
experiment. I
maybe
don't know.
this?
This is now a question of self-trust. Do I trust myself?
Right.
Do I
Mm.
trust?
Mm-hmm.
And I do trust myself. I do trust myself. That's ultimately the conversation from last month's reflection too. Like, do I believe I'm a good person? Yeah, I believe I'm an amazing human being. Like, I do trust myself. I do feel like I trust myself to be messy. I trust myself to have hard conversations. I trust myself to set boundaries. I trust myself to be really clear about what I want. I trust myself to not lie. I trust myself. And I trust myself to be an amazing communicator. I trust myself to be really in tune with my body and my needs. I trust myself to not judge myself. So I do feel like I've built a level of trust as a result of the actions I've taken. And I do feel like if I were to engage in intimacy next, or when I'm to engage in intimacy next, it'll be from a place of, it'll be from a different frequency than any experience I've had in the past. But I could say that about every experience.
Yeah.
Every experience you have is coming from a different level of frequency, a different emotional state, a different level of awareness. So, to say I'm ready or not ready, it's a moot point. It was a challenge I gave myself because of a thing I wanted to master within me. And I'm very grateful that I did that because I feel more connected, alive, confident, creative, and empowered than I have in past months.
I'm curious. I'm curious to know. Do you think there a place for? You don't have to answer this, but is there a place for like porn in the future? Do you see that? Do you see that something that is out of your life now, or do you see it as something that can be reintroduced in a different way, a different consciousness?
I don't have an answer to that. What I do know is that up until this point, every time I've reached for porn, it's come from a place of desiring to cope. And not to say coping is bad by any means, not to say that that's bad. But what I can promise myself is that I will have an honest conversation with the part of me that wants to reach for it before I do. And I can be in right relationship with that part. And if that
Mm-hmm.
part and I have a conversation and it's in alignment with what the moment asks for, sure. I'm not going to say that anything is absolute. This is what's like, there's no absolutes. It's
Mm-hmm.
just awareness and having a real honest conversation with myself about why I'm engaging in what I'm engaging in or what I'm doing, why I'm doing. Same thing with alcohol, same thing with food, same thing with my phone, same thing with any level of thing that I do in my life. There's no absolutes. I don't follow a diet. I don't follow anything. It's like I have a conversation with myself
I
before I
like that.
take any
Feels really
action. Yeah.
that feels really empowering, in the sense that you can take that step back and just that pause enough to check in to confirm actually what's the right thing, like what's the right relationship, what's the right step, rather than just being, because sometimes those coping mechanisms, like, and I'm sure you all feel this, they can be so magnetic and just so compelling and so irresistible.
Bingo.
Oh, that chocolate bar makes me feel so much better. Like, and you just do it by habit. And even if you kind of know it's not the right thing to do, it's not good for you, it's like, nope, I'm going to do it. I feel better. I feel better now.
Well,
But being able,
that's what it is. It's bringing consciousness to the unconscious, right?
Mhm.
That's ultimately what we're speaking to right now. You know, one of my favorite questions that I think I've spoken to on past podcasts came from a book called Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It by Kamal Ravikant. And the question is, if I loved myself, what would I do in this moment? Simple. If you loved yourself, would you pleasure yourself? If you loved yourself, would you not? If you loved yourself, would you watch porn? If you loved yourself, would you not? Those are honest questions that you can answer with yourself.
yeah, it's a great gauge, isn't it?
It's a great gauge. And it doesn't really, because then if you answer yes or no,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, you love yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
that's enough for the world. If every single human being just practiced self-love and trusted that loving yourself was actually the most important thing we could be doing as a species to improve all the problems on our planet, if everybody actually practiced this level of consciousness with their decisions and brought this level of awareness, it would be a great starting point for a lot of really important conversations that get to be had. Like, it's a great starting point. If two people who love themselves came together and had a vulnerable conversation about how to then co-create a relationship, changes the game. And so I always believe that orienting to this aspect, orienting back to self first before you orient to relationship, to family, to community, to like work. It's like, come back here. Just keep, this is the only thing that really, I mean, I don't want to say matters, but like, to change the world, you change yourself. And if everybody just took the time, energy to come back to themselves, a world filled with people that are working on themselves feels like a much better place than a world filled with people who are not. And that's really what I'm here to empower. That's my mission. That's why I'm here. It's my dharma. I want to get as many people on the path of awareness as I can, because it's, to me, the most important thing we could be doing as a species right now. It's the undercurrent behind every single problem that exists in the world. Every single problem in the world is coming from an unconscious mind, a disconnected mind. And I just feel this so strongly. I've been feeling it more and more as I've been building Liberate and watching what's happening in the world and witnessing just the conversation and seeing the climate in the US. I see it all. I feel it. And I'm just like, God, if everybody literally just had the tools and the willingness and the courage to go within, and the community, and if they could realize the amount of love that's found on that journey in community and being seen in this work together, just what could be possible for their lives. What kinds of profound levels of joy and love and connection and peace and creativity and safety could we create as a species? Loneliness wouldn't exist. Just wouldn't. We'd have so much empowerment as a species. We'd be self-empowered. And then when you're empowered, all you want to do is just be a light for other people. Our children would be safe. Like, there's and I just, yeah, I could talk about this for a long time, but I feel this so strongly that there's nothing more important in the world than people waking up to the fullness of themselves.
Yes, we have lots to do. Um, well, it's pretty bad at the moment. Pretty bad. There's lots of bad things happening, and I don't know what the solution is. I don't know how we get to a different place. But yeah.
Well, you know, and I also want to name, like, I just got back from a week of very important, deep conversations with people that have a lot of resources, and they're building. As much as we want to look at the shadow of humanity right now and how broken everything is, like, I also just want to really speak to, I'm in rooms with people that are actively trying to solve some of the world's biggest problems and dedicating every ounce of their resource to making that happen. So for everything you witness on the news about something shitty happening, there's somebody out there who is literally pouring all of their dollars, millions, if not more, into solutions to address uh, uh, and to build a better world. And so if you don't have the resources, just keep praying, keep sending prayers, because there are people who are listening to your prayers and acting and doing something about it. And those people aren't going to be the ones that the news puts the spotlight on. Those people are not going to be the ones that get public acknowledgement. They're not doing it for those reasons. But there are people who are truly dedicating every ounce of their being to solving some of the world's biggest problems. And so you can have hope that your prayers matter. When you pray for somebody in the world that's going through a hard time, when you pray for anything, when you pray for a better world, there is an intelligence that's taking your prayer and channeling it through the people that have the resources to make a difference. So just want to really name that, because we discount the power of prayer and the power of a longing and a yearning for a brighter future, a better world, a world that our hearts know is possible. That's why we cry, because we know what's possible in our hearts, and then we see heartbreaking experiences, news, things happening.
Yeah.
The truth is, the prayers matter. So,
So what's been your biggest takeaway from this last month, given the context of where we are as a collective, and in the context of what you've been discovering about removal from coping strategies, like grounding down? Where are you?
I mean, I guess the theme of the month is, building intimacy with your parts and rooting down. And when you root, you will meet parts that resist. The parts that want to cope are inherently against the parts of you that want to root, and that's the work. So if you always look at it from that lens of, and it's not an enemy that's preventing you from rooting down, it's actually a hurt part of you. It's a child. And I like to think of it as children, because it then helps me have the heart and it helps me develop the softness to be able to speak to that child instead of me speaking to it like it's an adult.
Mm-hmm.
So that softness, the tenderness, the feminine, instead of the very masculine, like personal growth, development. Let me knock this thing out. Let me eradicate it. I'm moving. No, it's like, I think what the world is really craving is a return to the divine feminine in all of us. We all have masculine and feminine, but I think that nurture, that softness, the tenderness that we can practice with our parts and ourselves is really what I'm now leaning more into. And that then can channel more of my masculine, a more clear and pure expression of the divine masculine. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that, I think that's what the world is like right now. It just feels that, like, I think we need men more than ever to wake up and do this work, because I do feel like the
What
divine
is your wish
feminine.
for men?
Hmm?
What is your wish for men?
Oh, my wish for men is to not be afraid, to own our shit, not be afraid, do the work, to be the leaders that we were born to be. Like, we have an incredible ability to truly be a safe space for healing, for expansion. And I think it starts by being a safe place for ourselves. And this is why I'm a big proponent of men's groups and men's communities and people that are doing the work with other men. I was at my last April. I joined, like, my men's group called the Guild. Um, we do medicine work together. Like, I think that's I'm on my path. Like, and I think that's what I'm encouraging all men to find men's groups. There's so many influencers on Instagram that are creating men's groups. There's so many communities. If anybody's interested in communities for men's groups, just send me a DM on Instagram. I'm happy to shoot some recommendations your way. But yeah, I just think it's just do the work. Don't bypass the work, because that'll just make your life harder. And I've now been on this path for like what, 6 years. My life just keeps getting better and better and better and better and better. And it's not slowing down. It's literally orgasmic at this point, how awesome my life is getting. Funny, because I didn't orgasm at all this month. So,
Good choice of words.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for this month's conversation, and for bringing some of these topics that are often difficult to talk about and difficult to explore. But it's really empowering when there's a space to just talk about them and explore them, even if it's messy. Because sometimes I think we can kind of hold back in case we say the wrong thing, and we get it wrong, or we upset people by talking about some of these difficult topics. But got to start somewhere, and I think you've opened up a really important conversation today around coping versus grounding down, and some of these common coping strategies that we all just instinctively lean towards, and how they can cause us harm and other people harm if they're misused or used as a replacement for what actually we're craving, what actually we're looking for. So thank you for being willing to go there.
Thank you for holding a space. Thank you for, and we talked about this before we started recording, but you are like one of 3 people who knows my insides in and out. And I feel very grateful that you have held that with such sacred responsibility. And I feel very grateful that I have you in my life that I get to share some of these tender topics with. And I'm really grateful for everyone listening, for supporting and being a part of my journey. Like, I never thought that I would have a platform where I could talk about myself and people actually want to hear what the fuck is going on. Like, I never thought that would be a part of my life. And it's like, so I'm just super grateful for everybody who is here listening to the very end, who chooses to be here week after week, who has been such an important part of my journey. Like, I'm so unbelievably grateful for each of you, for just, again, holding a loving space, whether you've reached out to me and let me know the impact the podcast has had on you, or whether, again, you're like thinking in your head, you're sending a prayer. You're like, God, like, thank you, Raj. Like, or if you're like, whatever, like, I can feel it. I can feel you. And it's what inspires me to continue pouring into this resource, and why I'm excited to continue doing even more. Like, it's my favorite thing to do. And it's because of the way I feel as a result of the episodes being recorded and released. And yeah, so I'm super grateful, and I'm super excited for continued evolution.
Thank you.
Everybody, that's a wrap for this week's episode of Stay Grounded. I'm your host, Raj. This is your old friend, Georgina, and from us, stay grounded. We'll chat soon.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of Stay Grounded. No matter where you're from or what you're going through, I hope it helps you remember just how incredible you are and have always been. If you're on a path of emotional healing or self-discovery and would like to learn how Liberate can support your journey, head to www.rajjana.com/liberate. That is LIBER8 to learn more about our current group programs and one-on-one offerings. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week.